And I think also we should mention Walnut Capital and REDC and how they've been really instrumental in redoing the Nabisco building. That's going to play a very large part going forward in bringing traffic and breaking the stigma that stood with us. Mm-hmm. They've taken the old Nabisco building, they lopped off the right side of it, which will be eventually a large courtyard entrance, and they're going to have primarily, their plan isn't even gelled yet, but their goal, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's going to be, the whole project is several 100,000 square feet. They're going to build a hotel, parking garage, retail, about 125,000 square feet was what they had originally talked about with retail, and the balance office with perhaps some condo apartment buildings.
The thing I went to the other day, the head of Walnut Capital was there, and he passed out like a schematic of it, and he talked about what they were trying to get in there, and he talked about how they got that tax increment financing thing. He basically just talked about the size of the buildings, the placement of the buildings, where the parking would be, how it would improve lighting and trees and pedestrian access and traffic lights. He didn't talk about what would be there. I think they're like hush-hush.
Dude,
except for a hotel. There's a hotel, a Marriott.
The main structure, the multi-story structure, will be redeveloped as commercial office space. And that's a welcome redevelopment, because you're bringing people who may not necessarily live in the district into the area for their jobs, and while they're here, they'll be able to shop the various retailers that we have in the area.
And this is interesting because there's this project that's underway right now, Bakery Square. Mm-hmm. Tens of millions of dollars.
Which had to get some Larimer designation at some point.
And in fact, it was advantaged by the fact that it sits within the Larimer community, which has been designated as a blighted community. And because of its blight designation, it was eligible or able to take advantage of some financing that otherwise wouldn't have been available to it. But what's going on over there hardly represents
Larimer.
It hardly represents the conditions in Larimer.
I agree that they don't say it out loud. They don't say it in public, but behind closed doors, that's what they want. They want gentrification, and gentrification could be a good thing if the place is completely dilapidated. I mean, this bakery is a beautiful building and it's gigantic, so there's like potential to do stuff in it, and it just sat there. So it's great that they're doing something with it. But what these people really want is for the stores that come in to be so upscale that black people are just like, oh, we're done with this, and just move on, and then they can reclaim what they see as theirs, and let them go to Homewood.
Walnut Capital is clearly not marketing itself to the people who live in East Liberty or Lincoln or Larimer or Homewood, even though the folks who live in Lincoln and Larimer and Homewood and East Liberty are going to be, by and large, the ones who are working in the service jobs that are created by this development. And unfortunately, the reality is that without a fair chance of forming a union, the workers who work in that hotel, the workers who work in the retail enterprises and in the office space cleaning the offices are going to have lousy jobs. They're going to have jobs that don't support families, that most likely will not be able to provide them and their families with health insurance or retirement security. So the real question to me is, do we as taxpayers want to fund developments that don't result in good for our neighborhoods, that don't result in families sustaining good jobs for the people who are paying taxes in the city of Pittsburgh?
Well, and that's understandable, because again, the developers there are taking advantage of the fact that it sits technically in the Larimer community. You see this? This is an example why Larimer was designated as a blighted community. This is, structures like this. This is the reason why Larimer is designated as a blighted community, because we've got lots of this. Bakery Square hardly started out looking anything like, it didn't even start out looking anything like this. Will Bakery Square necessarily benefit the current residents of Larimer? Not necessarily. To the extent that Bakery Square is able to attract other developments that might benefit people in the Larimer community, yes. So, and that brings us back full circle to this discussion about housing and building residential neighborhoods. To the extent that Bakery Square attracts other development interests, other investors, whatever, who might be willing to take another look at a Larimer community, a community like this for development purposes, that's a good thing. But it's only a good thing, and it only works to the benefit of the people who are residents here now, if the people who are residents here now get involved.
And are prepared.
Yeah, and get involved in that whole process of determining what happens here.
Well, I was talking with some folks the other day, and I was saying that, we recognize that there are many, many needs in the Lincoln-Larimer area, in the Homewood area. And as East Liberty continues to develop and push, the push is going to be east. And we're not going to assume that we should walk into somebody else's neighborhood and tell them what they need to do. But certainly as we move further along in the continuum and in the process, if ELDI is invited and some of the other stakeholders are invited to work with those neighborhoods, most certainly we would make ourselves available to do that. When we found out that Bakery Square was something that was going to happen, ELDI engaged the developers and said, well, let's plan that whole quadrant over there, because believe it or not, what happens over there impacts what happens over here. And so, there was a fear even on our part initially about Bakery Square, but now we see if they succeed, we succeed. And so people, again, when they hear that the community meetings are being held, they need to go out and they need to voice their frustrations and they need to voice their questions, but they also need to come with an open mind and an open heart to listen and hear what's being said.
And again, bringing in people from the outside, changing their perceptions. They may live in the North Hills or in the South Hills and may think that East Liberty is still what some people feel it still is a negative area. And when they come here, I think they're going to be pleasantly surprised, and we start to change those perceptions and draw additional people into the district.
There's a law in the city of Pittsburgh that says that if you receive public financing to build a hotel, then the city has a financial interest in that hotel, and the city, as a matter of good governing, has a responsibility to make sure that its investment is protected. So the law says that the city has not only the right, but the obligation to demand that there's going to be labor peace if it's going to fund a hotel. If we are going to put our public money, our taxpayers' dollars into a development that includes a hotel, then we need to make sure that the return on that investment is protected and that it's not going to get disrupted by a boycott, a picket, a labor dispute of any kind. It's called a labor peace ordinance. And in the case of Bakery Square, Walnut Capital and its hotel operator, Concord Development, were really creative. They were very inventive. And even though they're getting lots of money in public dollars to help with the infrastructure and to form the foundation of the building that the hotel is going to sit in, they declared that the hotel will actually begin on the second floor of the building. So the foundation of the building that the hotel will sit in is benefiting from public dollars, and the public investment is there. But they say, well, we're going to begin the hotel rooms and the hotel lobby on floor 2 and declare that that's a separate piece of property. That's a separate taxed entity, and therefore the public doesn't have an investment in that part of the building.
Well, you know, one of the things, this whole discussion that we're talking about, first thing is it's got to be predicated on there being a certain degree. How you doing, brother? It's predicated on there being a certain degree of honesty amongst the people that sit down at the table. You know, we got to tell each other the truth. We got to agree to tell each other the truth about what's actually going on here. I mean, we know, for example, that you can't build a stable neighborhood by populating it. How you doing, brother?
Hi, how are you?
You can't build a stable neighborhood. Hi, how are you? Good. By having just poor people, having big concentrations of poor people living together. So, you know, let's tell the truth about that.
We need all kind of people.
You need all kind of people.